It didn't happen on a balcony. It happened where power is real behind closed doors. Camilla believed she was minutes away from stepping out in the Queen Mother's tiaras, the ultimate signal that the past had finally been rewritten in her favor. Then, Princess Anne appeared, and with her came Prince Edward, quiet, loyal, but unyielding. No shouting, no spectacle, just one sentence that froze the palace: "You can't wear them." Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The urgency wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. Breaking didn't mean gossip, it meant interruption, the kind that arrives at the last possible moment because someone has finally decided silence is more dangerous than confrontation. Palace staff felt it instantly. The atmosphere changed, the rhythm of the corridors tightened, and the usual soft diplomacy vanished. This was happening right before something important: an appearance, a ceremony, a moment designed to be photographed and remembered. And that timing was the entire point, because if Camilla wore the Queen Mother's tiaras in front of cameras, the image would harden into history before anyone could undo it. One glance from Anne made it clear she understood that. This wasn't about whether the jewels looked appropriate. This was about whether the monarchy was about to endorse a message it could never take back. Anne's authority didn't come from emotion, it came from ownership of tradition. She treated those tiaras as heritage, not wardrobe objects that carry a lineage and a code, not simply sparkle. And in that private doorway, her presence felt less like a sister-in-law confronting the Queen, and more like a gate snapping shut to protect an older, stricter rule. Camilla, on the other hand, moved with expectation. She didn't act like she was asking for permission. She acted like she was claiming what she believed she had earned. Those tiaras weren't just jewelry to her. They were legitimacy proof that she had reached the level where even the most sacred symbols could be worn without question. That belief, that entitlement, was exactly what made Anne's refusal land like a slap to the entire system. Then came the shock move that made staff panic for an entirely different reason. Edward sided with Anne. Edward, the quiet prince who usually survives by staying neutral, staying polite, staying loyal to the smoothest path. But here he was, standing beside Anne as if he'd chosen a line and decided he would not step back from it. That single alignment sent a tremor through the palace, because it suggested a deeper internal shift, one that couldn't be dismissed as Anne being difficult or family tension. If Edward was involved, it meant this wasn't merely personal. It meant the resistance had structure. It meant someone had decided Camilla's symbolic reach was becoming dangerous enough to stop publicly, even if the stop happened behind closed doors. And that's where the staff panic became real. Because tiaras in this family are not fashion, they're identity, they're hierarchy. They're the unspoken language of who belongs and who is still being tested. The Queen Mother's tiaras carry a particular kind of emotional weight, old world legitimacy, beloved matriarch power, the glow of a time when the monarchy felt unshakable. If Camilla wore them, it wouldn't just flatter her. It would broadcast a claim that she is the rightful continuation of that legacy, the inheritor of that affection, the woman who can step into the Queen Mother's shadow without consequence. And that kind of claim has victims. It humiliates rivals, unsettles the future, and forces everyone else to accept a new version of who is allowed to represent the monarchy's most revered symbols. Which is why the first foreshadowing detail hit like a quiet confession. Someone tipped Anne and Edward off. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't Anne simply noticing something and reacting. Someone knew Camilla's plan, knew the timing, knew the impact, and decided it was urgent enough to pull two senior royals into motion. That raises a chilling possibility there are people inside the palace who fear what Camilla is trying to do with symbolism, and they are prepared to break the usual code of silence to stop it. And if there are tip-offs happening, it means there are camps forming. It means the palace isn't unified. It's splitting in whispers, in secret calls, in last-second interventions designed to prevent a photograph from becoming a permanent verdict. Camilla's insistence then becomes the real cliffhanger. Why now? Why these tiaras? Why the push to step out with the Queen Mother's legacy on her head at this exact moment? Because timing suggests intent. Camilla wasn't reaching for sparkle, she was reaching for a statement. A message aimed at the public, at the family, and at anyone inside the palace who still doubts her place. And Anne and Edward blocking her wasn't just a refusal. It was a warning that the family recognizes the message and is refusing to let it land. The silence after Anne's sentence didn't feel like peace. It felt like the beginning of a private war that the palace would do anything to keep out of daylight until it can't. But as the palace realized this wasn't just about diamonds, a darker question surfaced: what secret condition is attached to the Queen Mother's tiaras that Camilla was never supposed to trigger? Some royal jewels sparkle. These jewels warn. The Queen Mother's tiaras were never just ornaments, they were political artifacts, loaded with history, loyalty, and a kind of sacred permission no crown can fake. That's why Anne's refusal wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Because in the royal world, certain pieces don't belong to the wearer, they belong to a code. And Camilla walking toward them was like stepping toward a trap she didn't know existed. The palace has always understood something the public rarely sees. Jewels are not decoration in that world. They're language. They speak without speeches. They assign status without votes. And the Queen Mother's tiaras, in particular, carry a sharper dialect, one that doesn't just celebrate power, but polices it. They're heritage property in the truest sense, tied to legacy and symbolism and invisible rules that have survived reigns, marriages, scandals, and wars. You don't simply choose those pieces, you are allowed them. And that allowance isn't based only on rank. It's based on what the monarchy believes it can defend when the cameras flash and the public judges. That's why Anne moved the way she did, like a custodian, not a rival. In her mind, the Queen Mother's memory isn't a story you tell at anniversaries, it's a living institution you protect from being diluted. Anne's loyalty isn't sentimental, it's structural. She sees these pieces as sacred shorthand for stability, and she treats the vault like a boundary that keeps the monarchy from slipping into vanity and chaos. When Anne says no, she's not saying "I don't like this." She's saying, "This violates a rule you don't get to break simply because you want the image." That is the unspoken hierarchy at work. Some jewels are reserved for specific roles, specific moments, and most dangerously specific bloodlines, not always written down in official language, but enforced through quiet decisions that are never meant to become public. And then there's the chilling suggestion that made staff go still. These tiaras aren't just reserved, they are restricted. Not because diamonds are fragile, but because reputations are. The collection allegedly carries conditions tied to public reaction, meaning the palace has already calculated that certain optics would ignite backlash too intense to survive. That's not superstition, that's strategy. The Queen Mother's tiaras represent beloved matriarch legitimacy, the kind that the monarchy leans on when it needs to feel untouchable. If Camilla wears them, she isn't just borrowing glamour. She's borrowing emotional permission from the public permission the palace may privately believe she cannot safely claim. Edward's involvement is what turns this from family tension into strategic defense. Because Edward doesn't typically place himself in the path of confrontation unless something deeper is at stake. His presence suggests coordination, not impulse. It suggests that Anne isn't acting alone, and that this isn't personal jealousy masquerading as tradition. It's an institutional reflex kicking in stop the symbol before it becomes irreversible. Because once those tiaras appear in photographs on Camilla, the message becomes part of history, and undoing that message becomes almost impossible without humiliating someone powerful. This is where the foreshadow tightens like a wire. There's a written protocol or a private memo about these specific tiaras. Not a public rule, not something you'd find in an official briefing, but something the inner circle treats like scripture. A list, A set of conditions. A guideline tied to who may wear them and under what circumstances. And that's why Anne's refusal felt procedural, because it likely was. She wasn't improvising. She was enforcing. She was drawing a line that someone before her had drawn. And she was doing it with the confidence of someone who knows the vault doesn't answer to the person who wants the jewels, it answers to the code that protects the crown. Which brings us back to the cliffhanger that refuses to leave the room. Why now? Why is Camilla pushing for these pieces at this moment, knowing it could cause a storm? Because urgency implies pressure. It implies a reason bigger than style. The palace fears backlash if Camilla wears them, and fear like that isn't born from nothing, it's born from experience, from past reactions, from public memory that still hurts, from an awareness that some symbols can reopen wounds the monarchy can't heal. Camilla insisting now suggests she's trying to force a narrative either to silence criticism, to cement her authority, or to outmaneuver someone else who is rising in influence. And that means her move wasn't simply a preference, it was a calculated attempt to claim a legacy before anyone could stop her. And just when Camilla believed the jewels were hers by status, Anne revealed the brutal truth: someone else controls access, and the list of approved wearers doesn't include her. Prince Edward was never the headline maker. He survived by staying polite, staying quiet, staying loyal. So when he stepped beside Anne and backed her refusal, it sent shock through the palace because it meant something had changed behind the scenes. Edward wasn't just saying no to Camilla, he was saying no to a whole pattern of entitlement. And once a prince like Edward takes a stand, it's usually because he's seen something he can't unsee. For years, Edward's reputation had been built on avoidance of the spotlight and devotion to duty. He was the conflict avoider, the steady hand, the one who kept family storms from spilling into public view. That's why his alignment with Anne felt like a tremor beneath the palace floor. Because Edward doesn't choose confrontation unless the alternative is worse. And in this moment, the alternative wasn't merely awkwardness, it was a symbolic takeover. A photograph that would cement a message the family could never fully undo. Edward knew that. He understood how quickly tradition can be weaponized, how a single image can become a verdict, how the public doesn't read footnotes when it sees a crown and a legendary tiara in the same frame. Something had pushed him into action, a hidden trigger that wasn't meant for outsiders to know. A private incident, a whisper of pressure, a moment where Edward allegedly realized Camilla's plan wasn't about honoring the Queen Mother, but about claiming her. That realization changes a man. It forces a choice between comfort and principle. And Edward chose principle, even though he knew the cost. Because siding with Anne against Camilla wasn't just a disagreement, it was a fracture in the everyone is united illusion the monarchy depends on. It suggested something even more dangerous. A siblings of Charles resistance forming, not loud enough to be called a rebellion, but firm enough to stop a queen at the doorway and make her feel, for the first time, that not everyone will rubber stamp her symbolism. And then you understand the emotional undertone beneath Edward's calm. This wasn't jealousy. It was protectiveness over the Queen Mother's legacy, and anger at the idea of that legacy being exploited like a costume. Edward saw what Anne saw. These tiaras aren't just glitter, they're authority. They're a kind of emotional permission in the public mind, old-world legitimacy wrapped in diamonds. Camilla didn't want them because they matched a gown. She wanted them because they rewrite memory. The Queen Mother's jewels carry a specific kind of magic beloved matriarch energy, unquestioned acceptance, and Camilla wearing them would be a silent announcement. I am the rightful continuation. That's the real battlefield. Not the vault, not the jeweler, the public's perception. Because once that image is seen, it can't be unseen. Edward could feel the pressure building around that truth. The timing was too perfect, right before an event where photos would travel globally, before any quiet objections could catch up. Anne saw it as theft of legacy, Camilla saw it as rightful elevation. And the emotional stakes were personal as well as political. Camilla wasn't just trying to look royal, she was trying to be seen as the Queen Mother's successor in spirit, the matriarch of the modern monarchy, the woman who has fully inherited the past's affection. That's why Edward moved so fast with Anne, because speed is the only defense against symbolism. Delay gives an image time to exist, and once it exists, everyone else becomes the one explaining why it was wrong, which is another way of saying everyone else loses. Then came the twist that made Edward's stance feel even heavier. Camilla may have been responding to criticism by escalating symbolism. If whispers about her legitimacy were growing, the tiaras would be her answer, silent, gleaming, and devastatingly effective. And that kind of move rarely happens alone. Someone advised her. Someone planned the moment. Someone understood the optics well enough to know exactly what it would do to public memory. Edward sensed that machinery, and it made the tiara move intolerable. Because it wasn't tradition, it was strategy pretending to be tradition. He held information, something he couldn't say openly but couldn't ignore either. And the fact that he acted now implied a deadline approaching an event, a photo release, a narrative push that would become unstoppable if not blocked immediately. But Edward's stand wasn't only about jewels, it was about what Camilla was trying to prove by wearing them, and who would be humiliated if she succeeded. And just as Camilla's plan became clear, a more explosive truth emerged. Anne wasn't only blocking a tiara, she was protecting a promise the Queen Mother allegedly made. The palace runs on rules people pretend don't exist. And Anne, more than anyone, knows which rules are real. She hinted that the Queen Mother left behind something unspoken, but binding a promise about who could wear certain pieces and why. Not because of snobbery, but because of protection. Protection of reputation. Protection of legacy. Protection of the Crown's emotional contract with the public. And if Camilla broke that promise, the fallout wouldn't be private. In that moment, Anne didn't sound like a sister arguing over jewelry. She sounded like a custodian reciting a vow. The Queen Mother's line, as it was whispered, wasn't a petty preference, it was a safeguard tied to dignity and public trust. A boundary meant to prevent the monarchy's most beloved symbols from being used as personal armor. Anne treated it like living law, not old sentiment, because she understands how fragile the public's emotional loyalty can be. One wrong symbol, one wrong image, and the Crown doesn't just face criticism, it faces disbelief. And disbelief is fatal for an institution built on reverence. Edward backed Anne for the same reason. He recognizes the damage symbolism can cause when it's used as a shortcut to acceptance. A tiara can't fix a reputation, but it can provoke a backlash so fierce it hardens public opinion permanently. The promise itself carried a sting that nobody wanted to say out loud. It may not have named names, but it allegedly implied categories: outsiders, second marriages, those whose legitimacy would always be questioned no matter how many titles they wore. Not because the Queen Mother was cruel, but because she understood what the public would never forgive. The monarchy's emotional contract isn't written in law books, it's written in perception. And perception has long memory. If the Queen Mother believed certain pieces should never be used to force a narrative, then Camilla reaching for those tiaras wasn't merely a wardrobe choice, it was a challenge to the very logic that kept the monarchy stable through decades of turbulence. Foreshadowing hung in the air like a blade. There may be a written note, a private memo, an instruction connected specifically to those jewels, something Anne has seen, something she believes binds them still. Not a public decree, but a quiet directive that exists precisely because it would be too explosive to admit openly. And that's why the room tightened when Anne hinted at it. Because if a note exists, it means someone anticipated this exact conflict. It means the Queen Mother's influence didn't end with her death, it was folded into protocol, sealed into tradition, and left to the one person in the family stubborn enough to enforce it without fear. Anne. Camilla, of course, would sense that immediately. She would suspect the promise exists, suspect it restricts her, and that suspicion would turn her urgency into defiance. Because Camilla didn't come this far to be told she still isn't approved in the most sacred language the monarchy speaks. But the moment Anne invoked that promise, The room shifted because now this wasn't just family tension, it was a question of royal law. Palaces don't fall from explosions, they fall from fractures. And the Tiara standoff created one instantly. Staff didn't know who to obey. Advisors didn't know which narrative to prepare. Some saw Anne as defending history. Others saw Camilla as defending her authority. But the real fear was this. If Anne and Edward could block the Queen, then the monarchy's internal order had changed, and everyone could feel the shift like an earthquake no one dared to name. Two camps formed with terrifying speed. The Heritage Guardians treated Anne's stance as institutional protection, a necessary line that kept symbols from being misused. The current reign loyalists treated Camilla's demand as a test of authority. If the Queen could be stopped, then what power did the crown truly hold inside its own walls? In the middle sat Charles, trapped in a decision that humiliates someone he loves no matter which way he moves. Back his wife, and he signals that symbolism belongs to the present, even at the cost of backlash. Back his blood, and he signals that his reign cannot fully protect his queen from the family's internal limits. Either choice bleeds. And looming over it all were William and Catherine, not openly involved, but felt everywhere, like the future standing silently behind Anne's hard line. The future benefits from restraint. The future benefits when public perception is protected. And that reality made the standoff feel less like a one-night clash and more like succession optics in motion, with Anne and Edward acting as the wall that prevents Camilla from cementing herself into a role the public may never grant her. Emotional collateral spilled quietly. Camilla's anger sharpened into resentment. Anne's discipline stayed cold and impenetrable. And Edward's resolve, though steady, carried nervous recognition of the consequences. Because once you block a queen, you don't just stop a tiara, you start a chain reaction. Then came the twist that made containment impossible. Someone leaked the standoff to force a public narrative. Maybe it was to pressure Anne into backing down. Maybe it was to make Camilla look victimized. Maybe it was to frame Charles as weak. But the leak did what leaks always do. It turned a private fracture into public speculation. And speculation is the monarchy's worst enemy, because it cannot be controlled once it multiplies. The palace could feel time running out. Every minute without a clean explanation made the story uglier. Every attempt to craft the official reason risked revealing the very thing they wanted hidden, that the monarchy isn't united, and that the jewels are governed by rules the public was never meant to see. And just when the palace thought it could contain the damage, Charles was forced into the one decision that could shatter his reign, whether to back his wife or his blood. Charles didn't need a headline to know what was happening. If Camilla wore those tiaras, the photos would scream legitimacy. If she didn't, the refusal would scream rejection. Either way, the crown bleeds. Anne and Edward forced the issue into daylight, and now Charles had to decide what kind of king he truly is. The husband who protects his queen, or the monarch who protects the institution from becoming a personal vanity project. In that private crisis, Charles felt the trap closing from every side. His fear wasn't just that Camilla might be embarrassed, it was that her public humiliation would ricochet back onto him and expose the weak point in his reign, the perception that he cannot control his own household. A king whose queen is blocked by his sister and brother doesn't look disciplined. He looks divided. And division is contagious. Anne understood that, which is exactly why her leverage was so powerful. She didn't argue about feelings. She framed it as safeguarding the monarchy's emotional contract, the invisible agreement that the public grants respect as long as the crown appears principled, restrained, and above personal conquest. In Anne's world, if a symbol risks inflaming hostility, you don't wear it. You lock it away. You choose stability over vanity, even if it hurts. Edward's presence made it impossible for Charles to dismiss this as Anne being Anne. If it had been only Anne, Charles could have treated it as stubbornness. But Edward standing beside her turned it into a family front, an institutional refusal presented as duty, not emotion. That's when the optics war truly began. Staff scrambled, not for the jewels, but for language. They needed an official reason that sounded normal: security, scheduling, repair, protocol, anything that wouldn't reveal the truth, that the Queen had been told no. Because the moment the public senses a queen is being restrained from within, the public starts asking why. And the palace has never survived why without bleeding. The cruelest part for Charles was that he may have privately agreed with Anne. Deep down, he likely understood the backlash risk, understood the symbolic aggression of claiming the Queen Mother's legacy in a single flash of diamonds. But agreement isn't the same as action when Camilla is on the other side of the decision. Charles fears Camilla's reaction because he knows what it represents, not just disappointment, but a threat to unity, to loyalty, to the domestic balance his reign depends on. And when a king begins making choices out of fear of his own household, the institution starts to wobble. Charles could sense that wobble now, and it terrified him more than any headline ever could. Anne didn't threaten. She didn't have to. The message was in her stillness: some things are not negotiable. And Edward standing beside her made it worse for Camilla, because it proved this wasn't a personal clash, it was an institutional refusal. The Queen Mother's tiaras were the line, and Camilla stepping over it would trigger consequences nobody wanted to name. Because once you test heritage in public, you invite the public to judge you, and that was the quiet nightmare pulsing beneath every polite sentence. Judgment doesn't stop at the tiara. It spreads to the wearer, to the king, to the entire story the monarchy has tried to tell about who belongs. The standoff became precedent in the most dangerous way. A queen can be told no by senior royals, and the world can still keep turning. That reality shifts power, and power shifts provoke retaliation. Camilla's risk wasn't that she would sulk, it was that she could escalate behind the scenes to reclaim control, pressuring advisors, pushing narratives, forcing Charles to correct the insult publicly. Yet the monarchy for once signalled restraint. Not because it wanted peace, but because it feared the firestorm that one wrong symbol could ignite. Emotional stakes collided in silence: Anne protecting legacy like a vow, Edward protecting stability like a lifeline, Camilla fighting for status as if status were survival. And hovering over it all was the twist that made everyone's breath catch. A failsafe exists. If Camilla pushes again, the promise becomes public. The rule that's been whispered about, the instruction that's been quietly obeyed, the boundary that's been enforced behind doors could be forced into daylight as proof, as justification, as a weapon. And that's the final cliffhanger, the one Charles can't control even if he wants to. If the next move turns the promise public, it won't just expose Camilla's ambition, it will expose the advisors who encouraged it, the voices who tried to weaponize heritage, the machinery that believes images matter more than integrity. Anne and Edward may have blocked the Queen tonight, but their next target could be the people who keep feeding symbolic warfare into the heart of the monarchy, because stopping one tiara is easy compared to stopping the system that keeps trying to open the vault. But Camilla didn't come this far to be stopped quietly, and her next move would turn a tiara dispute into a full-scale power confrontation. And if you think this ends with a tiara returned to a vault, think again, because the real battle is who controls the monarchy's symbols next, and who will be exposed when the vault finally opens. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.